Okay guys, so I mentioned that Degas used a grid system, and I often find that sometimes for me it's helpful for me to kind of draw a box around my figure. And I don't use a ruler or anything. You can if you'd like, but I just kind of, I figure out where it hits the edges of a box. So like your head, if you imagine this figure in a box, you know, what parts of it are going to hit the edges. And so I just really roughly draw a box. And what this does is it helps you to start establishing some of the relationships that are going on. So I know that if I drop a line from the tip of her head all the way down to her foot, see those align, right? So when I'm mapping out this figure in my sketchbook, I know that my head of the figure has to be in line with her toe. Same thing here, you can kind of start to figure out angles. This also kind of breaks things up so that you see more of the negative shape, and so you can kind of estimate the distances a little bit easier. So I think I might draw a line here where the shoulder hits the outside of that box. And you could take that all the way across. So her shoulder is in line with her eye. There's all these relationships happening. And so once you start establishing them, it helps you kind of know, even drawing the angle of the hands. So the fingertips. So I now know that when I'm drawing over here on my blank piece of paper that I don't have, I know that that is the angle between those two fingertips. So I can then jot that down. This is my sketchbook. I could then draw my box and know that that angle is going to be the angle that those hands are joined together, right? I know that the head's going to start. And you can also kind of start to break it up. If you wanted to do a full-on grid, you could. You could definitely do that. But I tend to just kind of create relationships. That just seems to help me better. Also kind of closing in the areas, so if I drop this line down here, I can see more accurately what this shape is in here, the negative shapes. And I kind of choose where I do this. I don't do it everywhere, but it does help. It does help us to figure out how everything relates to each other. So you can start seeing clearer negative shapes. Using the negative shapes is a huge benefit. You can start breaking things up into kind of angles. And everything starts to become a triangle, right? A little bit. So you can start to see that. A tiny triangle here. See the angle between the feet. Let's see here. Draw a line to the point. So I can see that there's an angle or a triangle, this kind of a shape. So like we can draw triangles, right? You know, so this starts to kind of break things down a little bit. You can start to see the relationships. And we'll talk about this more as we start to do our drawing and our study drawing. It's like a puzzle. Angle of her face. So when I go over here, I know that her head's kind of over in this area. Arms are here. And this box is a little bit too wide, so I'd have to kind of adjust it. Because I know that from her shoulder, her arm almost hits that angle. Skirt. So I know that from the very corner of her dress, the skirt hits. So and her toe's going to be in the corner. So you can sort of start to contain the figure in space. Hand touches the edge of the box. You can even make those lines and then check your shapes. So is that shape similar? And so in this way we can start to block it all in. I'm looking at this negative shape in here now. So this is a little bit long. Again, I made my box a little bit too wide. That's okay. Just make adjustments. Using a really light touch when we sketch, you know. We don't want to commit to anything quite yet. There could be changes that need to be made. In fact, there probably will be. And like I said, if you feel like you want to draw out a very detailed grid, that's fine. Just is a little too mathematical for me. I just kind of rebel against it a little bit. And you know, I'm also the type of person, the type of artist that I don't mind things being, I'm not a realistic artist all the time. I'm not after photorealism. You can see I'm barely lifting my pencil off of the paper. I'm just really trying to map this out, feel it out. I'm not committing to anything at this point. I know that this line has to be like this. So you can see, I can tell that my head is not big enough, nor is it forward enough. So I can adjust that. That head really intersects this arm area. And, you know, don't judge your drawing too quickly. Figure drawing starts out kind of a mess, like a lot of things, okay? So pay attention to relationships between things and try and relax into it. It can be very sort of meditative if you allow it to be. I don't want to take this too far because I want to keep going. Here's the line that I need to establish between those fingertips. But yeah, it's okay to start out really rough, and again, really light. Looking at those negative shapes constantly. See, I can see here that the horizon line, or the line right here where this curtain falls, It's supposed to hit her in here. This leg is foreshortened because it's actually kind of pushed back, so it's a little tricky. Anytime you've got any kind of foreshortened form, it's a little bit harder to depict. This shape needs to be. So you kind of get the idea of how to use these angles and kind of mapping things out so that you have some point of reference to start seeing the relationships and the angles that are going on. So it's kind of a loose grid that I like to use. And if you don't want to use a grid at all, that's fine too. If you want to just go for it, then go for it. But you do absolutely need to pay attention to some of the relationships that are happening if you want to get a little bit more accuracy in your position and in your scale. Okay, now I'm gonna actually draw on my sketchbook. Hey guys, I was just reviewing the video and I saw something that was kind of, actually it's a really good example of why the grid is kind of helpful. So in my drawing, I remember one of the first things I said was to drop this. If I drop a line, imaginary line from the tip of her head all the way down to her toe, those are aligned, right? There's a straight line between those two. Now I went over to my picture and I see if I drop a line from the tip of her head down to her toe, uh-oh, whoopsie, I made a mistake. That's okay, right? But it shows me that this leg is out too far. And I can see that pretty clearly too. And what's great when you're working like this is get away from your work and pull back and look at it, because when we're in it and we're really working hard, a lot of times we don't see the errors. So if I look here and I kind of outline this shape of this negative space, look, see? The negative space here is too wide. So I would need to bring this back in. And if I look at just the negative shape and not think, oh, I'm drawing a leg, so blah, 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 I gotta get it right and I gotta freak out, then I can really focus on bringing some more accuracy to this drawing and bringing that foot. I know that that foot, that toe, needs to hit that line. So I can go back here and make the adjustment. And, you know, yeah, now I've got this kind of dark line and that's kind of a mess. But I could always go back in and erase if I really wanted to. I don't often erase things because I end up kind of, you know, working other things out. But when you're doing a simple pencil sketch, you know, it's totally fine to erase, absolutely. But don't get caught up in like getting, you know, too stressed out about it. But by doing that, and I see that her skirt also, so you start to see where things may have gone a bit awry. So I'm looking at this shape here. So I've got to get that shape in order to get the alignment right. And the skirt actually comes up a lot higher back here. So you can see that by correcting that, it immediately changes the pose and brings it more into scale. So I just wanted to illustrate that because that was a really great example of why making these kind of connections can really help your drawing. So, and again, this takes practice, it takes observation, it takes patience. So, but I want you guys to look at the negative shapes, the alignments, and the angles. That's really where it's at. And you just keep looking and observing. And again, don't worry too much about making changes. That's part of learning. It's part of this process. So, all right, now we're going to do another study in our sketchbooks.